Come on. I hear you, little bitch. Hey guys, it's Michaela back again with another video, and it is the beginning of June. Happy Pride, and this is my May 2020 wrap-up. I am going to keep this video pretty short, not only because I have not yet eaten breakfast this morning, so I'm very hungry, but also because, you know, talking about books is hard when A, it's hard to read, and B, when there are far more important things going on in the world at the moment. So I'm going to take just a moment right at the top here to say that Black Lives Matter, that trans lives matter, and that I'm going to put down below the links to some resources that I have found helpful. In particular, I'm going to be putting a link to Campaign Zero, which is a campaign that promotes the institution of 8 smart social justice policing initiatives that will decrease the likelihood and eventually hopefully erase the even possibility of innocent unarmed Black and brown people from being murdered by police. I am also going to link to the GoFundMe for the Tony McDade Memorial Fund. If you do not know, Tony McDade is a Black trans person who was murdered in Tallahassee, Florida, where I live. At the time where I donated, which was just a couple of days ago, the fund had already reached its goal by 6 times, which is fantastic. Still not enough, but amazing. However, I'm still going to link it and encourage you to donate, because you may know that in the recent days, a pillar of the YA space who wrote a, we'll say very influential YA series about a boy wizard has been full-on showing her turf bigotry and insisting that she knows more than like science. So I encourage you to support Tony McDade's Memorial Fund to help their family, and also to just find trans, and particularly Black trans, activist causes that you can support, because fuck J.K. Rowling. So with that being said, I am going to get to talking about the 10 books that I read in May. As you can see, most of them are very small, and that is because part of this truck, let's wait for this truck to pass. Come on, I hear you, little bitch. Most of these books are very small because that was sort of part of my sort of getting myself back into reading. I did not read very much in April, and it was very hard for me to get back into it. For May, I, like a lot of people, have had a hard time focusing on really anything for any length of time. I've barely watched any TV since quarantine started because I just can't focus. I got to read 10 books, but a lot of them are very small, but I'm okay with that. That is my truth for May. The first book I read was American Originality, Essays on Poetry by Louise Gluck. This is a book that was sent to me by one of my pen pals, Carolyn, whom I love dearly. Carolyn and I always exchange poems alongside our letters with everyone we send, and I know Louise Gluck is one of her favorites, so she sent me this. I'm going to be really honest, and I hate to say this, I only gave this 3 stars. A lot of the time I didn't know what the fuck she was talking about. I thought that the conversation was pretty inaccessible. I haven't studied poetry seriously since like my junior year of college, which was some years ago. So there are a lot of things I don't remember. The part of this I really love the most is, I believe it was the last section of this book, was a series of essays that she wrote that are actually the introductions to poetry collections by other poets from the Yale School of Poetry. I don't remember the exact details, but she wrote introductions for these poets' debut collections, and those I found really fascinating, and that was when I felt her language was the most accessible, and I really understood what she was talking about and like why she loved these poems so much. In general, when she was talking about specific poems or specific poets, that's when I could follow her, but when she was talking about more like the abstract concept of poetry, I really got lost. So that's why I gave it 3 stars. There were parts of it I definitely enjoyed. Like I said, that last section I loved, and I added a ton of books to my sort of like book wish list because of her recommendations. But then there were other points where I was like, I don't know what's happening here. But still, like, I'm always glad to be sent a book by a friend, so I'm glad I read it. The next 3 books that I read were Elie Wiesel's Night trilogy, sort of Night, Dawn, and Day. Night is his memoir, so it is nonfiction, and it is the story of his and his family's experience in the Holocaust, of first going to a ghetto and then going to concentration camps. And then these 2 are fiction. Dawn is the story of a Palestinian fighter who has been tasked with assassinating a British soldier during the British-Palestinian conflict. This soldier is set to be executed at dawn, and so the story follows this Palestinian fighter over the course of the night as dawn approaches, sort of reconciling with himself the fact that he's going to do this thing. And then Day is a story of a Holocaust survivor who is hit by a car in New York City years after the Holocaust has ended, and sort of how being trapped in this bed healing affects him and forces him to think about some things and challenge the way that he had been viewing the world, viewing his life, viewing his own healing process. All 3 of these are very good. I gave Night 5 stars, and I gave these 2 both 4. It's not, of course, that I didn't like these 2. I absolutely did like them. I just think Night was so stellar that it's hard to follow it up with anything. These were the first sort of 3 really short books that I decided to start reading to help kickstart or jumpstart my my reading practice again, and I picked 3 real downers to do that. So in retrospect, maybe not like the best move, but I am glad I read them. As I said in my TBR shelf tour, I did a history fair project on Elie Wiesel in the 6th grade, and I read, I believe, the first, not quite half, but the first part of Night as part of my research for that project, but I didn't finish it, so I'm glad to finally finish something I started literally when I was 11 years old. The next book that I read also came off of my TBR shelf. This came from my Book of Shame section, and that is Picture Perfect by Cordell Lewis. This book was actually handed to me by the author at Atlanta Pride in 2014, one would think. So if you were on Tumblr or just general internet spaces in 2013, around that time, you might recognize this photo, which is a photo of 2 gay Black dads doing their daughter's hair in the mirror. And it went viral, it totally blew up. And so this is Cordell, he is one of the 2 Black dads. And it's sort of him just telling his story. And this was a book I actually surprisingly had a lot of feelings and questions about. I shouldn't say surprisingly, that sounded shady. I didn't really know what I was gonna think about this, and I ended up thinking a lot of things. I'm actually going to read a little bit of a sentence for the back to sort of act as a trigger warning. I'm not going to be talking with any kind of detail about the things that Cordell experienced in this book. However, I do think it's just, you should know in case you want to pick this up for yourself, which you may or may not. With inspiring candor, Cordell describes his struggles with childhood sexual abuse, a drug-addicted and mentally absent mother, sexual identity, suicide, the trials of young fatherhood, and much more. So that is sort of like the big things that one might potentially want a content warning for. So there you go. Cordell Lewis was 27 when this happened. So I think he was only like 28. Late 20s for sure when this book came out. And I have recently turned 25. So here is my problem with that. Obviously, people of all ages can have the types of life experiences that are interesting, that are educational, that are informative, that are inspiring. The types of stories that memoirs could be written about, right? Like Malala wrote her memoir, and she was very young, right? I believe even younger than him. I think she's still younger than him. How old is Malala? I feel like I should know this. And I do believe that Cordell Lewis has led the kind of life that memoirs should be written about, that biographies should be written about. However, I think that if you are going to write a memoir, you should have some distance between the events you're writing about and the time you're writing it. Not only because distance allows for perspective, but distance also allows for growth. And you can obviously tell that, you know, from the very start of the story, I believe this book opens up when he's 5. You know, he's obviously grown quite a lot from 5 to almost 30. but I can't tell that he is really internalized or processed or dealt with the traumas of his upbringing. And his traumas are pretty extreme. Like, there is absolutely no mention of going to therapy in here. There is no mention of doing real work and really unpacking the things that happened to him and the things he survived. And I think that is just a product of writing a book reflecting on your past without really reconciling it. And this sort of is obvious to me because he, like, throughout this book, as he's describing things that happened to him, or things that he witnessed, things that he experienced, it vacillates between describing these events through the eyes of his younger self. So like if he's describing something that happened to him at 12, sort of describing how he felt and what he was thinking at 12, and then sort of placing his more adult view on those events onto that 12-year-old. And I think there is an argument to be made for both. I think there are situations in which it is more valuable to know, like, what was that 12-year-old thinking and feeling, and then there are times when it's more valuable, you know, to have that hindsight of being like, oh, this is what was going on, I didn't know that, right? I think it's valuable to have both, but not the way it was done here. And I wish I could be more specific, and I don't have any instances sort of mapped out, but there were times when he would sort of very plainly describe, like, oh, I was a child and I was, you know, craving that approval from a parental figure, and it felt very like, I know the words, I know the vocabulary of trauma, but it didn't feel like it was actually being dealt with. And like, maybe this guy has gone to therapy, I don't know, but I just didn't have any evidence that he had really processed anything, which then made me wonder, well, why are you writing this? Typically, you write a memoir if you have lived a life and learned things from it and grown from it in a way that you think could benefit others, and I don't see that in here. The writing, while not great, was definitely not bad. Like, it was, you know, I think perfectly average writing. You know, there was lots of telling language and not a lot of showing language, which can be difficult in memoirs, because it can be difficult to remember scenes. I am really glad I read this finally after I'd been sitting on my shelf for almost 6 years. But yeah, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I think it could have been better if he had spent like a decade in therapy and then tried to tell the same story again. This next book I'm not going to talk about a whole lot because I did an entire review for it. This is Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This was another 3-star book for me. I really enjoyed reading it. Like, I had a lot of fun, but I kind of lost my mind in that review. I hate the main couple so much because they're so boring. They're so boring. They aren't real people. Well, that's a big bird. But yeah, if you want to know my full thoughts, I did a long yelly review that I will link below and on the screen or whatever. But yeah, 3 stars, definitely a fun time. The next book that I read was Interrogations at Noon by Dana Gioia. This is a collection of poetry. Not very big. Oh, I thought I took the sticker off, but I didn't. I paid $1.99 for it at Goodwill. This was a lovely collection of poetry. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked the language. I found these poems very accessible. I don't read poetry properly, I should say that. I read poetry books like other books, just like a lot more slowly, but I don't do any of the things you're supposed to do when you're reading poetry. I was never a good poetry student. Yeah, this was a poetry collection that I had trouble putting down because I liked it so much. I thought there was a great musicality to the language, that it balanced sort of plainness and grandioseness. Yeah, I enjoyed it a ton. I don't know if I said, I can't remember, but 4 stars. I enjoyed it. The next book I finished, I considered making a dedicated review for, but I truly didn't know what I was going to say. I still don't know what I'm going to say now. I do know that as I was finishing it, sort of like in the final chapters, the denouement of the story, I was screaming, "What is this book?" out loud repeatedly because it was absolutely fucking bonkers. And that is Stranger Than Fanfiction by Chris Colfer. This is a book that was given to me by my best friend. She was doing like a purge of her room. I was doing a purge of her room. I was getting rid of a ton of her shit for her. So I took this because I hadn't read it and I wanted to. I had heard pretty mixed things about it. Most people didn't really care for it, but I had heard of like some people who liked it. So I went into it like totally open mind, and it was pretty garbage. It is, I mean, it's fucking wild. Like I don't even know where to begin to describe this book. So this book follows 4 teenagers who are all fans of this TV show that seems to be Doctor Who-esque. And sort of they met and forged this friendship because of this show that I can't even remember the name of. What is it? Whiz Kids. Sure. And they're all graduating from college, so they're taking like one final road trip together before they split up to go to their different colleges. And one of them sends sort of just like an on the whim sort of nothing letter or fan letter to the star of the show, Cash Carter, and like kind of as a joke invites him along on this road trip, and then he shows up. So it's about their road trip. So the 4 friends and then the star of this TV show that they have hero worshipped forever. And it's about what sort of they get up to. So much happens in this book, and it takes so many fucking wild turns that are so nonsensical. So this one of the guys of the 4 friends is Topher, and he is in love with Sam, who is transmasculine but isn't out yet. And then one of the others is, oh my god, what's his name? Joey? Possibly Joey. Is gay and the son of a preacher, something we've never seen before. And then the last one is Mo, and she is an Asian girl who her dad wants her to be like an engineer, but she wants to go study, we'll say art, but I don't remember. Again, a completely new story we've never heard before. There's so many cliches in here, like so many. I mean, when did this book come out? 2017. So this book, a lot of stories being told here that we have heard before, not really anything new, any new takes. The trans story is the only one that felt like kind of fresh, because we just in general don't have a lot of trans stories in literature, especially like not even YA literature. So that was the only one that felt like in any way new or exciting. The plot with the celebrity guy who joins them and where that ends up, so wild. This is a book that I feel in my bones he wanted to be a screenplay, because it had the beats of a screenplay and not the beats of a book. Just it felt not necessarily visual in the language, like I think it had sort of like the standard kind of visual language that you would expect from a book like this, but just the way that the story is told, I'm like, you wanted this to be a movie. You didn't want this to be a book. That's just, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but that's just how it felt to me. I don't want to spoil the ending for you, because it is truly so out of left field that it really needs to be experienced. So I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I was a very big fan of Glee when it was on, which of course Chris Cole first starred in, and I know that show and that fandom did not treat him well. So I had heard that this was sort of, because this was about like a celebrity and fan fiction, which I know Chris Colfer had some issues with, that I thought this was going to be a response to that, and I don't really think it was. And in fact, the nature of celebrity isn't really, I don't think it's a very important part of this. It kind of comes up, like it's not devoid of that, like it's not like the fact that Cash, who travels on this road trip with these 4 kids, the fact that he's a celebrity is not a part of this. It's just definitely not as big or as prominent as I thought it was going to be. This book commits a cardinal sin, not once but twice, in that it name drops its title in the most like kind of way. It does it 2 times. 2 times. It's like how the book ends. Like, so this is the final chapter of the book. Definitely not, Mo said. I don't care what Cash said on the first day in the car. Everything that's happened to us this summer, well, it's all been stranger than fan fiction. Oh, God. Do you not have an editor, sir? And that's the second time it happens. Something, basically almost an identical moment happens like halfway through the book, where I think it's the same character, Mo, says like, This Is All Stranger Than Fanfiction, something like that. And I was like, the title is bad enough, but to name drop it 2 times with such like, I gave this 2 stars. Probably the only reason it wasn't 1 because I cannot deny that I was entertained. The final physical book that I read in May was The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert, and this one was kind of a disappointment. I didn't really know anything about this book. I picked it up at Target. It was on sale. When I started reading it, I was immediately in love because the language of this book is gorgeous. It is some of the best prose writing. I was just head over heels. So I'm going to read 1 paragraph from page 3. This is page 3, and when I read this, this was the moment I knew I was in love with this book. He never did. By the time I turned 9, I'd recognized my secret belief for what it was, a child's fantasy. I folded it away like I did all the things I didn't need, old toys, bedtime superstitions, clothes that didn't fit. My mom and I lived like vagrants, staying with friends till our welcome wore through at the elbows, perching in precarious places, then moving on. We didn't have the luxury of being nostalgic. We didn't have a chance to stand still. Until the year I turned 17 and Althea died in the Hazelwood. Like, a great paragraph, right? Like, I was so into it. And then things kind of went off the rails. The first half of this book is like pretty slow. So basically the plot is this girl named Alice, she and her mom have been sort of like living on the run their entire lives. And her mom describes them as having this like rash of bad luck that just follows them wherever they go. But her mom has recently gotten married to this like really rich guy in New York, and they're living in this like really upscale apartment and she's got a stepsister. And then they find out that her grandmother, who was the author of a book of fairy tales that made her incredibly wealthy, but like also a recluse, has died. And Alice wants to learn more, and her mom was like, fuck no. Then sort of out of nowhere, her mom is kidnapped, and she is told that she has to go to Hazelwood, which is the estate that her grandmother was a recluse on and that she died on. You know, her mom has told her never go to Hazelwood, but she is told if you ever want to see your mother again, you have to go to Hazelwood. So she goes to Hazelwood, and it is an adventure that she takes with her classmate Ellery Finch. And it sort of takes a while for this plot to start, but I didn't really mind it. I liked the character of Alice. I liked the character of Ellery. I enjoyed them sort of getting to know each other, and sort of how, even though this is her family, Ellery Finch is like a diehard fan of this book, so he knows a lot about it. So he's sort of like educating her about her own family, but then she has to educate him about like what their lives have been like because of this book. It's really interesting. So I like that. And then the actual like magical shit started, and I'm gonna be real honest, I don't know what this book is about. They sort of enter the Hazelwood, and like it doesn't make sense. These book characters are real, and they're like from another realm, dimension. I don't know. It wasn't very specific. I mean, I know there's a second book, so maybe we get more information. There was basically this huge section in sort of the beginning of the second half where like first Alice is in the house trying to find her mother, and like weird shit is happening, and then she gets kicked out of the house, and now she's in the fairy tale world that I can't remember the name of, but she's in this fairy tale world, and she finds out she's from the fairy tale world. Guys, I don't get it. Like I want to describe this plot to you so bad, but I was like reading this and I was like, it was like a different language. I didn't understand it. Then at the end, like it's sort of like at the end, it sort of like wraps itself up, and I'm like, okay, I know where we ended up, right? I know how the book ends, and I know how the book starts, but I have no idea how. So I ended up giving this a 3 because it was so unbelievably confusing. The language was so beautiful. Like I wanted to give it a 4. I was like, even when I was at my most confused, my most what the fuck is happening, I was like, well, this is still a 4 because the language is so beautiful. But then I got to the end and I'm like, I can't in good conscience give this a 4 because I don't know what the book is about. Like at the end of the day, I don't know what happened. This very well might be a situation in which my aphantasia, which I have talked about in previous videos, I will link, this might be a situation in which that is coming to really bite me in the ass. Like maybe there was a visual component that I just wasn't getting. I don't know. but I just know that I wasn't getting this. You know, about a third of the way through this book, I was so in love with it that I hadn't even finished, and I already went and put the second book, which I can't remember the title of, but the second book in a series on my wish list. And now I'm not so sure. If I can sort of find it on sale at like Target or whatever, I'll probably pick it up just because I am curious to see if maybe the things that I missed are better explained. But again, I'm not rushing out to get it because this was very confusing. The last book I read, I'm also not going to talk about a ton because I did an entire read with me. It was a read with me for my first time experiencing Wattpad. I had never even come close to venturing into the world of Wattpad before, so I spent a day reading the 2019 sort of like best romance book on Wattpad. It is called Requiem for a Soldier, and the username on Wattpad is L. Lawrence. Like I said, I did an entire read with me for it. It's the longest video I've posted to date. It was almost an hour. I'm very sorry. And it was an experience. I gave it 2 stars, and if you want to go know more, I will leave the video linked down below and up on the screen. So those are the 10 books that I read in May. I was proud of myself for even getting 10 books done because, like I said, reading is very hard. Focusing on things is very hard. But as I practice, it is getting easier. As I record this, I've already finished 2 books for June. So I'm happy about that. Like I said before, have a very happy Pride. Will I do a Pride related video? Maybe. I don't really have like a ton of plans right now because can't focus long term. We're not doing long term stuff right now. But if you can find a way to support, in particular, Black, queer, and trans spaces, people, activists, organizations, what have you, because these are members of our community who are the most at risk, the most oppressed, the most disadvantaged. Even if you are a member of one marginalized space, there are always going to be people in that space who are part of your community who can use extra help, and this is a perfect time to do that. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for reading whatever you have read. I of course always encourage reading the words and voices of people who do not look like you. I didn't do that a ton in May, but I hope to do better in June and in the future, just in general. I need to stop talking. I'm so hungry. Thank you so much for watching. And please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Okay, bye.